Greetings, brothers and sisters. It's brother Muta Mwenidi sharing the authentic truth brought to us by Zulula 100, the only teacher. The message today is a teaching that Zulula 100 gave recently regarding promise made to Sango, or Abraham, known in the Korean Bible as Abraham, but his true name is Sango. So here I'm going to be translating the teaching and also some of the verses that are given. And this teaching that the second, so Zulula 100 gave, he promised that he was going to give a life on promises made to Abraham. And like I've mentioned, and you know that his real name is Sango. The second has already demonstrated with such ease regarding the true name of Abraham, so his true name Sango. The day the teaching was given, there was a bit of a struggle, a spiritual disturbance, because in relation to the very title of the life of the teaching is a promise made to Abraham, so to Sango, so a promise. That is to say, meaning when you give your word and you make a promise and you must fulfill it. You must accomplish the promise. And that's why the occult world did not want the life to take place. That's why the life started a little bit later. They didn't want the second to keep his promise for the life. And during the life, there was two concurrent live stream at the same time in progress. So on Facebook Live and on TikTok. And there was 100 of people watching the live. So without any further ado, we're going to delve into the story of this character known as, in the current classical Bible, as Abraham. So in the so-called religions or revealed religion under the person of Abraham or Abram. But as you know, as I've said, and I say it again, his real name is Sango. At one point in ancestral Africa, he received a promise. So he received a promise. So we're going to see the very mystery of this promise. To do this, we're going to delve into the mysterious book, The Hidden Face of Bibèl, the revealed code of the authentic Bible. And also you see there also Bibèl, the authentic Bible, Kálat'a, currently available in les éditions Zulula 100. So whenever the second gives his teachings, we often find what we call phases. He gives many phases. So the first phase here consists of talking about the anxiety of Sango, the one who they will call Abraham. At one point, he was advanced in years. He was someone who was very well at ease. He was extremely rich, so he had wealth. And he already had a certain age, so he was advanced in age. But he did not have any children. He did not have any children of his own. And normally in ancestral Africa, the parents, they used to have many children to propagate not only their name and also so that the name of the patriarch could not be extinguished. So he also had to have an heir at all cost. But he had no heir of his own, because his wife, Kinye, her, who they will call Sarai or Sarai in the current Bibles, she was sterile. She could not bear any children. And the entity in charge of birth and the entity in charge of the introduction in the visible had not yet permitted her to have children. So, because, like I've mentioned, the entity in charge of birth and the entity in charge of the introduction in the visible had not allowed her to bear children. So, that's a little bit of the introduction regarding the anxiety of Sango. So, at one point in Sango, chapter 1, verse 88, so I put the link here. So, at one point in Sango, chapter 1, verse 88, we're going to go to verse 88 to verse 98. It is said here, after this event, Mukaisedi appeared to me a fourth time and said to me, column. So here I'll stop. So after this event, so it is Sango himself who's speaking, because he's the one who tells the story. Yes, Sango did in fact write. He left his testament, he left his writing. He wrote it down. And he did indeed write. He left his memoirs to his descendant. So he says here in verse 88, after this event, Mukaisedi appeared to me. So who is Mukaisedi? Mukaisedi is the entity who guides and who enthrones the initiates. It is from this entity they took, they tried to introduce him in the current class of the Bible, and they will call him the angel of the Lord, the messenger of Yahweh, Adonai, Elohim, and others. And some will also claim that he is the theophany of God himself. So Mukaisedi says here, Mukaisedi appeared to me a fourth time and told me, column. So here it says a fourth time because Mukaisedi had because Sango was accustomed to receive the visit of Mukaisedi, because that was the fourth time that Mukaisedi appeared to Sango, to this patriarch, who marked his time, his epoch, even till today, because the story of Sango, they've introduced them in that story in the current Bibles, and they call him Abraham. So they change his place of birth, his name, and so on. So Mukaisedi will appear to him, will appear to the patriarch. And Mukaisedi comes in the past, who is the present of Sango, because Mukaisedi is not in time, is out of the time of the visible. And said to me, column, do not fear, Sango, Nende Nguma, in bracket, I am a shield for you, period. Your reward will be very great. So, Mukaisedi, who is a superior spirit, appears to the patriarch Sango and tell him, do not fear, Sango, Nende Nguma, I am a shield for you. Your reward will be great. So he appeared to this patriarch who's worried that he's going to soon leave the visible because of his old age and so on. And that patriarch is worried that regarding he doesn't have an heir. So he will soon leave the visible world and he will join his ancestor in the afterlife, but accept that all the riches that he has all over the continent, because he was very rich, to whom will he bequeath them all the wealth? So he's worried. Will his name fade away? Will he be forgotten in the world of men? Because he was a great patriarch, so at the moment he leaves, he must necessarily leave something on earth, some work, some deeds. But Sango, in verse 89, he says, I, Sango, replied, Ekombe Mukaisedi, in bracket, powerful entity. What is the use of giving me anything? Question mark. So during the conversation, Sango will know the frequency of the Mukaisedi. He will understand that Mukaisedi revealed to Sango that he is going to give him a reward, because Mukaisedi said, your reward will be very great. So Sango understood that. And he says, Sango respond, what's the point of giving me anything? What's the point? Because I'm soon gonna, I'm childless. What is the point? Because Sango was already rich. He had a lot of wealth. So what is the point of giving him, according him more wealth, more reward, if for Sango he's childless, he doesn't have a descendant? Who is he going to share that wealth, those reward with? With whom will he enjoy this? So he says to Mukaisedi, Ekombe Mukaisedi, powerful entity, what is the use of giving me anything? I am childless, and the entity in charge of birth and the entity in charge of the introduction into the visible have not granted me any descendant. Period. So in ancestral Africa, you have to understand that there were two entities, spiritual entities that the initiate knows. So the initiated know that were behind birth. There is firstly the entity in charge of birth. That is when the child, the embryo, he's developing, the fetus is developing in the mother's womb. The entity in charge of birth must be there so that the child develop well in the mother's womb, so that the pregnancy goes well and that the child emerge in good condition, without any disability, well balanced. And now there's also the second entity. So the other entity is the entity in charge of the introduction in the visible. And this entity ensures that when the child enters the visible, the child arrives in a correct disposition, in a good condition. While the entity in charge of birth is also responsible for the birth and also for the proper development of the child in the womb. That is, in the secret place in the womb, in the mother. So the initiates, they knew this. In ancestral Africa, the patriarch knew that when a woman is pregnant, Behind her, there are certain entities who accompany, accompany her, protect her, so that the pregnancy goes well. So that when the child is born, the child is ready, the child is good. So Sango, in his response, Sango knows that, and he tells Mukaisedi, because Sango has penetrated that. He understood that. That's why he says, I am childless, and the entity in charge of birth and the entity in charge of the introduction into the visible have not granted me any descendant. My heir, the one who will receive my goods, comma, is Jesebwam, in bracket, so that's the definition of the name, to make well seated, to make well dwelt, to lodge well, or well housed. So, and then end of bracket, the one who takes care of my patrimony. So Sango tells Mukaisedi that since your kind, your brothers, the other entity, have not granted me a descendant, an heir, this is the heir I have found myself. Because Sango was very rich and he had a lot of wealth. So who is he going to leave all that he had? So his inheritance, his heritage too, his patrimony. Is he going to leave it to some looters or some the neighbors that he doesn't know? No, because he also has worked hard for that, and he also received some of it as inheritance from his parent. For that, he tells Mukaisedi that this, because he says here, the one who will receive my good is Jesebwam, the one who takes care of my patrimony. And that man, Jesebwam, he was basically the handman of Sango. And that man was also advanced in age. But what you have to understand here in the revelation is that that man, he had a descendant. He had children who were also well disposed, who fear Loba, the only and unique creator, with the fear and respect that is due to him. So Sango also considered the son, the children of that man, that of his handman, as his own children. That's where he prefers to leave his inheritance, his patrimony, to this man, to this handman at that moment. Verse 90 says, and I, Sango, I said, column, see, the entity in charge of births and the entity in charge of the introduction into the visible have not given me any posterity, and here is a man attached to my house who will be my heir. So you understand that an heir is not necessarily someone that directly comes from you, like your son or your daughter, no, your children, no. It can also be someone of a good morality, a friend. It can be your niece. It can be someone who is well educated, who who is well disposed, who has the fear of respect that is due to Loba, and who walk according to the verb, who respect the law, the precept, the recommendation, and that you have confidence in that person, that person, even though you leave the visible, you leave him your heritage, an heritage that is not gonna just sell it or don't manage it well or squander it. No, he will still honor your name, and even though you're no longer there. So somebody who will still preserve your heritage, even though it belongs now to him. So Sango had already designated somebody as his heir, who was also old. In this, now we move to phase 2, designating of the heir. So the designation of the heirs. Then Mukaisedi spoke to me, column, it is not he who will be your heir, comma, but rather those who will be born of you, period. So Mukaisedi, the entity, has the vision, is the vision. At that moment, Sango did not have the vision of the future, because Sango, he lives in his time, in his era, in his epoch, in his present, in his moment. And he has not yet penetrated the space-time continuum. So that's why he says for him, he has already designated someone who will be his heir. But now, Mukaisedi tell him, he's going to reveal to him that this man that you have designated as your heir is not going to be him. It's going to be those who comes directly from you. It's not that man that this trusted man that you have selected as your heir. No. Because in the future, we have decided, so that's the entity, who will be your heir. And this is where he will now reveal the true heirs of Sango. And he says, then Mukaisedi spoke to me, column, it is not he who will be your heir, but rather those. So those, because in the Revelation, it says those, so many descendants. Those. In the current classical Bible, they will say, they will mention regarding one person, because they will temper. No, it's those, is the plural. Those who will be born of you. So Sango at this moment, he is old and he knows that his wife is sterile. She cannot bear children. But why is Mukaisedi saying that Sango will have an offspring? Because right now, Mukaisedi is revealing Sango those secrets. And also, because for Sango, he was already old, so for him, he will soon leave the visible. But Mukaisedi, when he revealed him, no, it's going to be those who are born of you. It means that also your life, you have to understand here in the revelation that the life of Sango is also being extended. Because for Sango, for him, he was already ready to leave. He was set. He has set his hair. He has put his things in order. He was ready to go. But Mukaisedi tell him, no, it's not going to be this person you have chosen. It's going to be those who come directly from you. Those. So you're going to have many children. And we know that a woman, she doesn't give birth just after one day. It takes time. When you go once I see you and once I don't, it takes time for the woman to become pregnant, to give birth, and to give birth, right? And then he says those who will. So it's not only your wife will. So Mukaisedi revealed here that your wife will be pregnant, but you're not gonna only have one descendant, one heir. You'll have many. So several children. For you also, for Sango to be aware of the heritage that you will bequeath. So, like I've mentioned, we are prolonging Sango's existence so that he can live a long life, have children. That's the revelation that Mukaisedi gave to him during the conversation. Verse 92. Then Mukaisedi brought me out, in brackets, spiritually, and said to me, column. Look at, in bracket, the immensity of the universe in another plane. End of bracket. So end of the parentheses. So here, Mukaisedi will take the spirit of Sango out of his avatar, out of his physical body, so that he can see things spiritually and not physically, and not according to his own logically, but he will see things in the spiritual sense. And it's also because the descendant of Sango who will come, they will be powerful. They will be seated in the word. That's why it says here, look at, in bracket, the immensity of the universe in another plane. And when he says in another plane, it means in another reality. And he says, look at the immensity of the universe. The immensity of the universe. Because with the eyes of the spirit, you will look at what even the telescopes cannot penetrate and see. So it was also necessary for Sango to be, at this moment, initiated into the importance of his descendant to come. That's why it is said, look at, in bracket, the immensity of the universe in another plane. The heaven during the night. In bracket, see a part of their protective entities, end of parentheses, and count the stars, comma, if you can. So something is being revealed here to Sango. There's a powerful initiation. He's being revealed that among the people, at every birth, behind a child, behind a man of the people, there is a protective entity, a protective spirit who is behind. There's a spirit in the form of what will represent a star. That's why Mukaisedi revealed, tell Sango, here, see a part of their protective entities. Yes, of your descendant, meaning of the offspring that will be born of you. Because long before even Sango existed, and before the offspring are born, you have a protective spirit who is there already before you're born. But this protective entity spirit knows that you will be born in a given space-time, in a given moment, in an era, in an epoch. But that spirit is already there. This entity is already there. And that's what is being revealed here to Sango. That look at their protective entity. Because Sango he should no longer be just a simple, an ordinary man. He was now necessary for him to know the spiritual secrets, to know things in depth, to be in the revelation. That's why he says here, Mukaisedi brought me out, in brackets, spiritually. So he was taken out spiritually. And he was asked to look at, the immensity of the universe in another plane. So like I've mentioned, in another plane, it means in another reality, in another dimension. He will not only look at the visible physical universe, but he will see through the great veil, beyond the visible eyes. He will see the spiritual world. He will see these entities, each entity which are linked to each one of his offspring, and so of his descendant. That's why he says here, some of their protective entities. He says, and count the stars if you can. He says here, and count the stars if you can. And Mukaisedi declared, column, such will be your descendant. Because it means the stars you are seeing regarding Sango, because Sango cannot see all the stars in the universe or in the multiverses. But he see part. But what he can see, he cannot even count. And Mukaisedi tell him, such will be your descendant. Because in the immensity of the universe and multiverses, they are what are called oceans of stars. Verse 93, I, Sango, trusted Mukaisedi. So he believed, he received the revelation, he penetrated the vision, he understood, he accepted, he believed in Mukaisedi, and he trusted Mukaisedi. And he trusted Mukaisedi. This is also why in verse 94, this is also why Mukaisedi considered me as righteous. Now, Sango's nephew, known as Lot in the current classical Bible, but his true name is Boti, was already righteous before Sango. But well, at this moment, Sango is being revealed. But at this moment, Sango is being revealed. At this moment, what is impossible for him, for his own comprehension. Because for Sango, for the patriarch, he was old, his wife was sterile, he set an heir that he chose because he did not have any offspring. So that's what he understood, that's why he had accepted. He was, and he already had accepted that, the entity in charge of birth and the entity in charge of the introduction into the visible did not grant me any children, any offspring. I don't have any descendant of my own. So that's what he believed, that's what his own comprehension, what he understood, what he had accepted. Now Mukaisedi, the entity, comes and reveal him the opposite. And show him not only that you're going to have offspring, and that in the spiritual side, in the spiritual sense, in the invisible side, the protective spirit are already established for each one of them, for each one of those who will come. So that was a heavy burden, a great revelation, a huge revelation that Sango received. And that's why he had to be outside of his physical body, outside of his avatar, to understand these things, to penetrate these things. And that's why he trusted Mukaisedi. And when he trusted Mukaisedi, Mukaisedi considered him righteous. So that's what he says here in verse 94. This is also why Mukaisedi considered me as righteous. Verse 95, Mukaisedi said to me again, column, Nende Mukaisedi, I am the entity, in bracket, who brought you out of Wasejedu, in bracket, East Africa, to give you this country in possession. So, Sango understands this. He listened to it. He captures the frequency of the Mukaisedi, meaning he understands Mukaisedi's words. But there's still a question mark. Because Mukaisedi said to him, Nende Mukaisedi, I am the entity who brought you out of Wasijedu, East Africa, to give you this country in possession. He understands, but there's still a question. That's why he asked in verse 96, to which I said, Ekombe Mukaisedi, powerful entity, how will I know that I will take possession of it? Question mark. Because for Sango, for him, he is a simple man, like everyone else. And at this time, there were powerful people. There was influential people, chiefs, conquerors, and so on earth at that time. But Mukaisedi tells him, everything you see, this immense land, I will give it to you. Well, Sango internally is asking himself, well, what will he be like? What will he be like? I'm not king on earth. If I was king, yes, I could understand, but he's not a king. He's not a sovereign pontiff like Pasele, who they will call Nimrod, or Gilgamesh in the current Bibles, the fake names that they give him. So Nimrod in the current class of the Bible, or Gilgamesh in the fake, so some other fake tellings. But his real name is Pasele, who was powerful on earth. So Sango understand here, it means, well, who am I for me to take possession of it? How will I know? How would that happen? Because it doesn't mean when he says here that to give you this country in possession, and how would I know that I will take possession of it? It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean here that Sango is going to steal the land. No. But how does he know that he will be the heir of all these things? That's where Mukaisedi said to him, Mukaisedi said to me, your spirit knows it. Your spirit knows it. What this means here is that your spirit can know things and you, your brain, don't know. How does this happen? Let's say you're in a situation, you have a problem, an equation that you need to resolve, answer. You're trying to find a solution to a problem that is causing you anxiety, that is causing you trouble, that is disturbing you, that is bothering you, it's upsetting you. At some point you're thinking, trying to find the solution. You ask some people, each people that you ask answers you according to their own logic, own understanding, but the answer that you're receiving doesn't satisfy you. And then at some point you enter meditation. You remain calm. And then, an idea. You said, I found the solution. But since then you were thinking, you couldn't find the solution. Where was the solution? The solution was not in your neuron, in your chromosome, in your brain. Where was the solution? The solution was in your spirit. And the spirit transmits the solution through the canal of the soul, through because the soul is the intermediary body, and it transmitted to the brain, and it comes to the brain, and then now and sometimes the spirit can also speak to you about a situation, but you don't accept it. For example, let's say there's two paths, two ways. There's left and then there's right. And then your logic wants you to go left, but there's a voice that speaks to you in a split second. It's like a premonition, like a feeling, a pre-feeling that no, go right. Like a thought. But you don't listen, you go left, and then bad things happen there. You find out, no, it wasn't the correct way. I knew I should have gone right. But it was your spirit that spoke to you, but that you had to go right, but you did not listen. So that's basically Mukaisedi says to Sango here, your spirit knows it. Even if Sango came out spiritually, the spirit has his own consciousness, the soul has his own consciousness, and the body has his own consciousness. But the three are one, but they vibrate in different planes. So you're one person vibrating in all three dimension planes. And verse 98, it happened that, as the sun was shrinking from before my eyes, a deep, mysterious sleep seized me, I Sango. So, earlier, Sango explained that Mukaisedi took him out, brought him out spiritually. So, and that he saw the immensity of the universe based on what he could see. He was shown the protective entities, spirit, who were already there long before the world could be formed, created, or manifested. That these are the protective entities of your descendant, of those who will be born of you, of your ear, of your posterity. He saw these things spiritually. Now, he further recounts that it happened that as the sun was shrinking from before my eyes. So, when he left the body, it wasn't specified that he flew, that he went into the universe to see. Because being in the spot, on the ground, in the visible, but in the invisible of the visible, you can see the immensity of the universe. You don't need binoculars. With the spirit, you see things clearly. But the question of now is because it says, says, as the sun was shrinking from before my eyes. So it means time was passing in the visible. Time was passing. And he says, a deep, mysterious sleep seized me. The question now is, was he out of his body when he says, a deep and mysterious sleep seized me? Let's admit that he was out of his body. Can the spirit sleep? Yes, a spirit can sleep. And when I say a spirit can sleep, it doesn't mean that the entity of the great order of things, they sleep. No, they cannot sleep. But a spirit can sleep, and we'll reveal that to you. So, a spirit can sleep, but the spirit will not cry with tears. Tears is in the physical. Tears are something physical. It's not like in Revelation chapter 5 regarding John in the classical day Bible, where for him it was necessary, he was crying, but you're told that he was in spirit. But we're going to show you that a spirit can sleep. But it's not the sleep of fatigue because you worked all day, you're tired, you come home and you're asleep. No, it's not that type of sleep we're talking about. There is a spiritual sleep. And once again, when I say spiritual sleep, it doesn't mean that the entities sleep. No. The entities don't sleep. They cannot sleep. And the spiritual sleep has an origin. It began somewhere for a reason. And Sango reveal, he says, a mysterious sleep seized me. So a mysterious sleep. So it's not something ordinary. It's something mysterious. Out of the ordinary. A mysterious sleep seized me, I Sango. I find myself took with anguish, plunged into a great obscurity. In bracket, the entity of obscurity was there. So, it was a great obscurity. It wasn't obscurity because the sun was shirking. No. It was darkness, obscurity, because Mukaisedi has allowed that obscurity. That obscurity, and Sango had never experienced that obscurity. He had never seen it. That's why he was afraid. That's why he was in anguish. Why is he in anguish? These are prophetic gestures. This is an initiation, the basis, the basics. Because he will first be shown his protective entities. He will first be shown the protective entities that are there, the protective entities of his offspring. So, who will come of the offspring that will come of him. But before the offspring arrive, he will be shown something. He will experience something. He will experience something that his descendant will experience. For him to also be in contact, connected to his descendant, who are not even there. That's why he says, mysterious sleep seized me. Mysterious sleep seized me. I, Sango, found myself took with anguish, plunged in a great obscurity. So it wasn't ordinary obscurity. Because regular, it's not like the darkness, the obscurity where you can see your hand, where there's the moon, you can see the stars, and so on. No, but this obscurity frightened him, and that's why there was a mysterious sleep that seized him. So it's not a sleep of the physical. It's a mysterious sleep that he was seized of. And he was took with anguish. And how he plunges in obscurity. And at that moment, at the same instant, here, you're told, so basically Mukaisedi will manifest himself in the visible. Verse 99, Mukaisedi told me, column. So at one point did Mukaisedi leave? We go in verse 97. Mukaisedi said to me, your spirit knows it. Your spirit knows it. Period. So Mukaisedi had finished speaking, so he left. He was no longer with Sango. And you're told in verse 98, and it happened that as the sun was shrinking from before my eyes, a deep mysterious sleep seized me. So even in spirit, so basically his spirit, even his soul, felt this mysterious sleep. When we go in Ebotedi, chapter 1, verse 116, it says, at the same moment, Mukaisedi manifested himself in the visible, semicolon, then closed the eyes of my spirit. And spirit here is with the capital S. So uppercase S, capital S. Close the eyes of my spirit, in bracket, my second consciousness, end of parentheses, in the mystery of the great veil, in bracket, the entity of the great veil was there. Verse 119, 117 to 18, it says, it was then that I, Moto, thus fell into the oblivion of the original nothingness, in bracket, the entity of nothingness was there, end of bracket, the non-consciousness for those of the visible, of the non-existence of the visible. The non-existence of the visible, because I, Moto, had also become the consciousness of the visible. 118, I, Moto, suddenly fell into a deep sleep. This under the effect of Mundima Yo, the entity of sleep. And because when you are in sleep, it means ko-iyo. That's why we say ko-iyo. So iyo is sleep and ko is to fall. And when he says, so iyo is sleep. So ko-iyo, to fall asleep. Into a deep sleep. So ko-iyo. So the original language is about precision. So in Ebotédi, verse 116, it says, and then closed the eyes of my spirit. And like I've mentioned, spirit here is with the up capital S. So it was a spiritual sleep. And because even regarding Moto, because Moto is the first man, in verse 170 it says, and it was then that I, Moto, so the very first man, universal black man, the first man, thus fell into the oblivion of nothingness. And he says, I, Moto, suddenly fell into a deep sleep. So this was before the fall. And the first man was a living soul. It was an intermediary spirit, because spirit in the original language is mundi, and the soul is also mundi. It's an intermediary, like a transitory spirit, which means it's a spirit that is between two planes, between the visible and the spiritual. Because the soul feels the emotion of the body and also of the spirit. The soul is a body of desire and emotion. It's an emotional body. So the first spirit that was made to sleep here, it was a soul, it was Moto. So it makes sense that this is where the spirit was allowed to sleep. Now, not sleep when you breathe, when you're snoring, no. That's not it. It's a mysterious sleep. It's also the same sleep when someone dies. Because when someone dies and the person isn't conscious on the other side, it's a sleep. Death is a sleep. But it's a sleep where you don't dream. So you have to understand these things. You have to understand the meaning in the spiritual language, in the original language. So, phase 3. the terrible revelation. So, or the formidable revelation. In Sango chapter 1 verse 99, it says, it says here, Mukaisedi told me, you must know this. A large part of your descendant will inhabit the shadow of the valley of death. They will enter into a great servitude under the hold of a powerful and extraordinary spiritual sea monster that yields very great power in the occult world. So, at some point in the future, the offspring of Sango, will experience the occult world through a spiritual sea monster. So a demon. It's the very first demon that existed. And the author of the Bibles, they will introduce that story in the current Bibles, and they will claim, no, it was Pharaoh. Because in ancient Egypt and even in the current Bibles, they will compare Pharaoh to sea monsters. In other version, to a crocodile that lies down by the Nile or on the Nile. So the great crocodile. So that's therefore a sea monster. But it's the story of this demon, this sea monster, that they will take and they will invent that Pharaoh who will put the children of Israel into great servitude. But what is the true version? What is reality? It was a demon, a spiritual sea monster. And it was in the spiritual sense, where there was magic, witchcraft, divination, and so on. So a large part of the uninitiated people were under its yoke. They felt fear, anguish, and so on. So Sango also had to be able to experience this first, initially. That's why he had to be first be in obscurity. So that he could experience what his descendant would also experience. So Sango himself was he was made prophecy. It was a prophecy. It was used as prophetic gestures. That's why even in regarding Melchizedek, Abraham in the current Bible gave the tithe to Melchizedek, because the Levite were the Levite must receive the tithe of everything, right? And the Levites were in the bowels of Abraham. Basically, spiritually, it means because Abraham, with all his wealth, all these riches, he will give it to his descendant. So Sango there will represent the people giving the tithe to the Levite, so the inheritance. And the Levite, who now will represent Sango, give part to the high priest, part of their share, because the Levites receive the tithe, and part of their share they give it to the high priest, and that's why Sango, so Abraham, give the tithe to Melchizedek. So, once again, Sango is part of the people. He's going to give to the Levite who are in his womb. So, he's going to give his wealth, his goods, his heritage to his descendant so that they emerge in good disposition. And so to the Levites, and the Levites now, Sango, by giving the tithe of everything to Melchizedek, it's a spiritually a symbolic representation of how the Levite gave the tithe to the high priest. So, Sango is saying, is being revealed what will happen to his descendant, and he's experiencing it. So this is what Sango, he says here, that a part, because he says here, they will enter into great servitude under the hold of a powerful and extraordinary spiritual sea monster that yields very great power in the occult world. Verse 100, it will crush it. So that's the part that will be crushed. So a large part of your descendant. He will crush it, mystically dominate, end of bracket, for a very long period known to us. Period. Known to us. Now, phase 4, the announcement of the coming of a powerful prophet. So the announcement of the coming of a powerful prophet. However, the spiritual sea monster, to which a large part of your descendant will be under the hold of servitude, will cry out to Tete, and it's a powerful mutopeda mudi, prophet, so capital M, so prophet of the black race that the verb of Loba will raise up to judge this sea monster. And it will then come out with great consolation. So it will come out, that's referring regarding the large group, the large part of the descendant, will come out with great consolation. And like I've said, they took this story and they will in the current Bibles and they put it in the current Bible, and they say no, it was regarding Pharaoh who put the children of Israel into servitude, into slavery, and so on, and in Exodus. But however, that never happened. But the story here, the real story, is what Mukaisedi is revealing to Sango here. So Mukaisedi revealed the future to Sango. And he says in verse 102, as for you, Sango, you will go in peace to join your Bambambe ancestors in the state of the living initiates. Your physical body will be buried after a happy old age. So here Mukaisedi revealed to Sango that you will go in peace. Because if Mukaisedi didn't say that to him, Sango will still be in fear, in anxiety, uh, in distress regarding what will happen to his part of his descendant, about what he experienced. That's what Mukaisedi tell him. As for you, Sango, you will go in peace. You will go in peace. Join your ancestors. So not to worry, not to constantly be thinking, oh, I'm going to be living, how are my descendants going to be, and so on, in the worries and so on. How will be in the future? No. Sango is going to go in peace to join his ancestors in the state of the living. And he says, your physical body will be buried after a happy old age. Happy. So he will be happy during his old age, during his life. Verse 103. Your descendant will not return here until the fourth generation known to us. For the uninitiated have not yet exceeded the limit of their crime for me to chase them out. Period. When the sun was shirking from before my eyes, and complete obscurity appeared, suddenly there was a great sign in the visible heaven. It was the spiritual image of the prophet Busi. Busi is who they will call, in the current Bible, they will call Moses, Moishe. So, before Moses, but his true name is Busi. So, before Busi was born, before he even existed, Sango already saw Busi. What he looked like in the spiritual sense. So he saw his spiritual image. So he was told, here is the Savior who will be there to save those descendants, a part of those descendants. So he will uproot this part of your descendant from the occult grip, from the hold of the occult world. On that day, in verse 105, Mukaisedi made a covenant with me, saying, it is to your descendant that I will give the territory of Wassemutonga, Central Africa, and even beyond this great and vast territory. So that's why you also understand that why Central Africa is like this, why there's so much wealth. Basically, almost all the wealth of the world, so the natural resources and so on, is concentrated on the soil of Central Africa. Why? Because it was already prophesied. It's a spiritual prophecy. That's why it's also the center that's centralized. So it is to your descendant that I will give the territory of Wassemutonga and even beyond this great and vast territory. So this is the promise made to Sango. And the second, Duálá 100, honored his promise. because the Facebook Live had to take place, and some disturbing spirits did not allow the live to take place, didn't want it to take place, so that the second could not keep his promise. But the promise was kept. And through that, you see that what the second is saying is what he's living. And he says, we are in the spiritual, in spirituality, we are not in sensations. Tété is still glorified. So that was the teaching. All glory be to Loba, the only and unique Creator.